Hello, and welcome to our Othello discussion of Act 3. Um, we pick up with this notion of the Cassio with the clown and the musician, and he's giving the clown money to get Amelia to hear him out as he asks a favor of her. And again, we see this whole idea of money, right? And manipulation in some ways, right? Roderigo is giving Iago money to try to get Desdemona to like him, love him, listen to him, whatever, just as Cassio, right? So we see this use of money, this use of being able to buy. Is it affection? Is it time? Is it paying someone to listen? Um, again, isn't that what psychology in some ways is? Again, Shakespeare describes a lot of these psychological ideas and theories that weren't even around at the time. Is he kind of predating psychology in some ways? And is this scene a moment where, you know, we're seeing, being able to pay someone to listen to you, being able to pay someone to listen to you and hopefully advocate for you? So, nevertheless, right, we've been discussing psychological criticism throughout. I think that that's a very interesting scene. Um, Act 3, Scene 2 is very short, right? And now that brings us to Act 3, Scene 3. And we see Amelia is talking with Desdemona, right? And she says, "It grieves my husband as if the cause were his." Line 4. Um, right? Basically, so Iago has his wife Amelia. He's manipulating her too, appealing to Desdemona for him, advocating to Desdemona to then advocate to Othello for Cassio. So he's got his wife talking to Desdemona. He's got Cassio talking to Desdemona, right? So that Desdemona will then talk to Othello, and it'll play into his plan. So his manipulative plan is really moving forward, and we see that again. Calling him Honest Iago is both true and ironic because although he's honest with us and himself during his soliloquies through the omniscience, he lies and manipulates everybody else in the play, including his own wife, his best friends, his co-workers. He truly is Schadenfreude personified. Um, so we kind of see how it works. Um, and Iago begins to plan the next phases as the act moves on. Um, the reverse psychology is just, I mean, you just want to jump in there and be like, Othello, no, just like earlier with Rodrigo, no, don't believe him. And let's skip ahead to lines 110 of the scene, uh, where it's preceded with line 108 and 109. Othello says, "What dost thou think?" And Iago says, "Think, my lord?" And Othello says, "Think, my lord, alas, thou echoest me, as if there were some monster in thy thought too hideous to be shown. Right? Why don't you want to tell me what you're thinking? Is it bad? Thou dost mean something I heard thee say, even now that thou likest not that when Cassio left my wife. What didst not like? And when I told thee he was of my counsel, of my whole course of wooing, thou criedest, Indeed, and didst contract and purse thy brow together, as if thou hadst shut up in thy brain some horrible conceit. If thou dost love me, show me thy thought. So, what is Othello saying here? When you saw Cassio with my wife, when I told you that Cassio was there to help me woo Desdemona, you had these weird kind of telling responses and looks, right? And if you love me, tell me what you're thinking, even if it's bad, because now I'm thinking you're thinking something's bad. Right. So rather than Iago saying, "Oh my gosh, you're never going to believe this," and overdoing it, right? Remember when in Hamlet, during the play within the play, the reenactment, the player, the queen when they're watching the reenactment of the murder of old King Hamlet, right? And Claudius and Gertrude are watching, and the queen's like, "Oh, when you die, I'll never love another. If I kiss another, right? If I kiss my second husband in bed, I kill my first husband dead. Something like that, right? I would never find another. It's you, 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 you. I'll always love you. I'll always love you. I'll never be with another, right?" And Hamlet looks at his mom and he says, "Madam, how likes you this play?" And she says, "The lady doth protest too much, methinks, when you overdo it." Iago's the opposite. He uses that reverse psychology. Like whenever people are like, "Well, you don't want to know what I'm thinking," actually makes you kind of want to know even more. And so Iago says, "My lord, you know I love you," right? And then that's line 121. And Othello says, "I think thou dost. And for I know thou art full of love and honesty, and weighest thy words before thou givest them breath," right? Because you're honest, because you love me, and because you think before you speak, right? Therefore, these stops of thine fright me the more. That's why I'm getting really nervous. It's working, right? Iago spikes his replies with these innuendos, these suggestions, these implications, these deliberate hesitations. And it frustrates Othello. And he thinks that Iago is concealing something. So he insists that Iago speak candidly. "If you love me," right? It's kind of the same as when Othello had to pull out the details out of out of Iago, the details of the situation with Cassio and Montano, right? When Cassio wounds him and loses his job. I don't want to tell you. You don't want to know. He's always kind of seeming one way, and it furthers his manipulation. He's very duplicitous, and he's very good at it. So what does he say at the line 130? "Men should be what they seem, or those that be not, would they might seem none." Right? People should seem how they are, and if they're not going to be honest, they shouldn't look honest. That's him. It's very ironic that he's the advice that he's giving Othello is very logical, and the person that Othello should be aware of is him. So, and Othello says certain men should be what they seem. So this idea of seeming and being, just like with Hamlet, right? When they say, "Why do you seem so upset?" And he says, "Seems? I know not seems. I am." Right? So this idea of appearances, it was something that was fascinating people in Shakespeare's day, just as it fascinates us now. Duplicity versus honesty, seeming versus being, appearances versus reality. Themes that we saw in Hamlet, saw in Macbeth, we see now in Othello, things that we see in life. We saw it in the story of an hour. The relationship seemed one way, but in reality it was another. We saw it in the yellow wallpaper. The husband and the doctor seem to think that's a good idea to kind of cure her postpartum depression, but in the yellow wallpaper, she lets us know that's not the case. It's not helping, right? So Iago acts like his buddy. And if you notice on line 151, he says, "I confess it is my nature's plague to spy into abuses, and oft my jealousy shapes faults that are not, that your wisdom from one that so imperfectly conceits would take no notice, nor build yourself a trouble out of his scattering and unsure observance. It were not for your quiet nor your good." Oh no, no, you don't want to know what I'm thinking. Sometimes I think these things that I overthink it, right? Nor for my manhood, honesty, and wisdom to let you know my thoughts. Right? It wouldn't be smart, wouldn't be honest, and it wouldn't be masculine of me to tell you. Lots going on there. Critical thinking, psychology, gender, culture. Othello says, "What dost thou mean?" Right? And Iago goes on to kind of continue to speak with these hesitations and innuendos. And finally, right, Othello says, "Ah," right? And Iago says, "Oh, beware, my lord, of jealousy. It is the green eyed monster which doth mock the meat it feeds on. Jealousy, an irrational emotion, form of paranoia, ripe for psychological analysis. Right? He tells him, "Beware, my lord, of jealousy." He puts her faithfulness in doubt, and it works. It is the green-eyed monster. You ever heard people say when you're green with envy? Is the green-eyed monster which doth mock the meat it feeds on. So the more you become jealous, jealousy is mocking you because it's an illogical and irrational emotion. So to become jealous, to embrace jealousy, thinking jealousy is on your side, is making you better. It's not, it's mocking you. So we see the personification of how jealousy, right, panders to us, manipulates us, and gets us to embrace jealousy when in reality it's just mocking us. It's mocking our logic because it's an irrational emotion. It's a form of paranoia. So then Othello says, "Why is this? Would I make a life of jealousy? To be once in doubt is to be resolved." Right? And he has this whole speech. And then Iago says, I don't have proof, but, you know, this, that, the other thing. And again, he just endears himself, and Othello more and more just wants to believe him, right? Iago appeals quite shrewdly to Othello's lack of experience with, Venetian women, implying that he's unskilled in personal matters, and these women hide things from their husbands. And we see Iago's mastery throughout, Act 3, Scene 3, as we're approaching lines 200, right? Line 210, he says, "She did deceive her father marrying you." Right? That goes back to Brabantio's very prophetic in some ways, foreshadowing when he says, "Look to her more if thou hast eyes to see. She did deceive her father and made thee." And Othello says, "My life upon her faith." Right? Remember in Act 1. And we can kind of see hubris starting back then in some ways. Um, so he places the doubt in Othello in the scene, the seed of doubt, if you would, and he's slowly fertilizing it and watering it, fueled by his Schadenfreude, his desire to derive pleasure from others' pain. Um, Bottom line is, at the end of the scene, Iago has won Othello's trust through reverse psychology, through illogical emotional appeals, through manipulative techniques, through manipulations of language. And now Othello is very suspicious of Desdemona and very trusting of Iago, right? He starts questioning why he married. He starts recognizing that maybe he's being deceived by Desdemona, which is exactly what Iago wants him to think, and kind of leave you with his omniscient speech, right? That I feel really emphasizes how successful Iago has been in instilling the paranoia, the jealousy in him. Lines 260, Act 3, Scene 3. Iago leaves, right? And Othello's on stage alone, and he says to us with the omniscience, this is before Desdemona and Emilia come in. He says, "This fellow's of exceeding honesty, and knows all qualities with a learned spirit of human dealings." Again, that whole idea of honest Iago, both true and ironic. "If I do prove her haggard, though that her jesses were my dear heartstrings, I'd whistle her off and let her down the wind to prey at fortune." He's starting to believe Iago's manipulations, Iago's illogical assumptions. "Haply, for I am black, and have not those soft parts of conversation that chambers have, for I am declined into the value of years, yet that's not much. She's gone, I'm abused, and my relief must be to loathe her. Oh, curse of marriage, that we can call these delicate creatures ours, and not their appetites." The objectification of women as possessions, that we can call these creatures ours and not their appetites. Um, Remember, just as Lady Macbeth uses illogical assumptions to persuade Macbeth, right? If you love me and if you're a man, then you'll kill Duncan. He does love her and he wants to be a man, right? But we don't show our love and our masculinity by murdering people. Here, Iago says she's going to cheat on you or she's cheating on you for two reasons. Because you're old and because you're African. She needs a young Venetian like Cassio. You see in this moment, he's starting to buy into Iago's manipulative, illogical assumptions, right? He's starting to doubt himself. So not only do we see ageism and racism, right, and other fallacious appeals, but we see how skilled Iago is at using reverse psychology, using the hesitations, using the insinuations to further his manipulation. And he's so evil, so evil. He is just Schadenfreude personified. So, thank you for your patience. More to come. Stay tuned.